start thinking about the 41 million people on our platform. And for that reason, we then do blast. Guilty, right? What are we doing about it though? One of the big conversations right now in Safaricom is about ensuring that we understand customer journeys and then we do right by it. So are you still receiving blasts from us? Yes, because we have this program or system that allows us to send CVM messages. When you see those messages, they're crafted and they're supposed to be scale messages to a large number of, largely our, should I say, that's when we're doing a mass campaign or a campaign that is supposed to reach many people. Right now, we are really on a journey towards segmentation, such that I know you, I know that maybe you're only online nighttime and SMS is not your thing. So we're doing our own cleanup, and yes, we have understood that it's not efficient, it's not working for us. Actually, most customers now are putting us on Do Not Disturb, which is a bad place to be because then I can't communicate with you. Then when I come and look for you on social media, you're so irritated that the only conversation you want to have with me is Safaricom, stop disturbing me. So we're really on a journey towards segmentation and sharing platforms for communicating with customers. Apology accepted.
Yes.
Nice. Oh, I know, go on and on. Our time is not on our side. There's somebody saying, please.
I know, I just answer. Let me just quickly answer your question. So with what you had asked on whether we do it concurrently, yes, we do. So how it happens is we have a two-track approach, yeah? So let's say we're launching a new product. When we're launching a new product, we're just trying to create that like mass exposure and vibe and everything. So that would go out, to everyone, yeah? It would be like basically cold all the way. But then when we're looking really to convert, and as you said, for example, we have the early adapters and we have like so when we say N-, it's like someone who's had a phone for like 4 years, etc. This would actually happen concurrently. So we would be sending one, let's say it's an email to the early adapter, and we'll be sending completely something different to someone who's just trying to buy an A series. We don't have two agencies that do it, we do it at the same time. And how it's possible for you to also do this is you need to like check into automation tools, etc. It make it very easy. Once you have your segments and your targets and all that, you can actually just create two very different content formats and send them to an array of different segments and targets.
I'll give you a minute.
Thank you very much. It's actually 3 questions, but they're all tied together.
Okay.
My name is Andrew Balongo Pere. I'm a freelance video marketer where I use storytelling to create awareness about the awesome things that every single one of you is doing. Now, I noticed that agencies influence perception, but I noticed that our agencies here on the ground do not do storytelling. It's easy for me to access Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy, UK, giving talks, yet our local professionals who have shaped how we view brands don't have storytelling. And I asked this question in a marketers WhatsApp group. What content would you like to see agencies create as marketing managers and what have you? So that's my first question, which goes into the second question, which a marketer asked, why do you want to tell agency stories? What is the ROI of storytelling? So hence, I'd like to ask you, what is the ROI of storytelling? Shufa, you obviously know, you can give your small sense, but for the rest who really don't do storytelling, what is the ROI? Because I love how Flavor brought out the KPIs. And then the last question would be, what is the ROI of thought leadership? Because all of you are giving thought leadership here, and I'm writing so many notes. This is a masterclass for me. I understand personally. But it seems the decision makers in agencies who shape how we view stories don't understand. So do you mind addressing all those 3 questions? Thank you.
So storytelling, the most powerful tool for every marketer, because people, and the only reason we relate to people is through their human stories, right? So today we are challenging ourselves. A lot of our communication tends to be brand out, which is buy Fuliza for 10 GB for 5 minutes. What if I approached it from a way where I start the story by, do you want to watch EPL for blah, blah, blah? And then my product hard sell comes at the very end of that conversation. I think that should be more compelling. So one of the conversations we're really driving with agencies today is it can't be hard talk. It can't be my hard selling that I'm throwing at you every single day. If you're still doing it, I'm sorry, we'll correct it. But so the conversation is really, how do I tell you about the Safaricom network and how it has transformed lives and shifted how someone in Turkana is accessing healthcare and technology in a way that makes you feel like you'd love to go to Turkana and support that community, as opposed to we have the best network. So storytelling is a big part of it. And we at MSK, we have a board member who's Chris Madison, and he's in agency. I'll make sure he gets that message that they really should come to the table in terms of influencing the storytelling.
So if I could just add on lastly to the question you asked on like what content maybe in terms of video you want to see, I think there's generally a shift from like product centric to consumer centric. So really, I think now it's not just about like having like an amazing product film or short video. It's really about how can you bring out that consumer emotion or that consumer feeling through the product, in a film. So just like walk through the experience of the consumer as opposed to really the product. I think that's a way to go, and it ties in well with storytelling, create a story around that and bring it to life. I think that would be the direction that most marketers will be going towards. Yeah.
And I think agencies are changing. We just need also as marketers to join
Change.
that journey.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think it's also what are we doing. I said for us, we are clear, we suck at storytelling. But if our brands are people, which they are, how do they come across to you? Because if you're coming across to me as an ad, I'm sorry, there are 50,000 ads are being served every day. So yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
What an amazing conversation this has been. Please clap for the panel. It's been heavily riveted, and we've all understood different dynamics that would enable us to be better marketers out there, to know how to make business. And wearing my cap as the chairperson of the Marketing Society of Kenya, where we believe that we're the force behind business. So every other aspect of any organization thinking about making money, you need the marketing department. And hence the reason why our seasoned leaders have been able to enable us learn, relearn, and unlearn, and even be able to equip ourselves better, that we will not leave the same way we came in today. Clap for them once more, our amazing panel. Thank you so much, Flavia, and for the good work that you're doing. We're right behind you, and cheerleaders. Thank you so much, Jean Akech Nyawara, for the work that you're doing, of course, at Diageo. We really, really appreciate. And also just being able to share. These are things that would not have been enabled for everybody else. And thanks so much to DTW, having enabled this forum to just have other people also to hear from you. Shufa, storytelling, you've seen that. She's for sure a storyteller. And the work that they're doing at the amazing, as they say, the #1 station across Kenya, and what you're doing digitally as well. And even just being able to help people be educated, be informed, and at the same time entertained as every day when we work with your channel. Wairimo, thank you so much for having given us good insights across, and even just being able to know how do we use our data, how do you utilize it, what do you do, and knowing what really happens at the back of Samsung. And we thank, of course, DTW enabling this session for us to be able to share with all of you. We say asante sana. Thank you so much.
Let's appreciate once more the panelists for this conversation, led by Zuhura Ogada, Marketing Association of Kenya Chairlady. A round of applause for this panel as they walk off stage. Thank you so much for such an engaging conversation. And you could see the level of interaction was really up there. And some of those questions that you have, and probably you may have needed an answer for, from this panelist, I'm sure you could find an opportunity in any other of our subsequent sessions, because these conversations do overlap. Yeah. And just before I introduce the next panel on stage, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned this morning on this issue of the evolution of marketing in the digital world. They started off with the key shifts that have happened in the marketing space. The fact that now the customer is mostly online, yeah, and rarely offline, and the need, therefore, to access and interact with them wherever and whenever. Yeah? So starting the journey with the consumer and spending your time understanding the consumer, the need to cater for the different clients. If the consumer moves, you move with them. Yeah? The use of AI also very interesting to analyze, predict data, and to create content that resonates with that consumer, and where the AI plugs into this issue of marketing. Challenges, they started off with a mindset, the reluctance to move with the times, yes? And to embrace new emerging technologies. So listen to the consumer, follow them, and learn from them. Easy, it might sound. Fostering agility. They say, be better. Progress over perfection. Yes? Do not be embarrassed to learn, because that's the only way. And yeah, other things on brand authenticity. They touched on ethical data practice, especially on transparency, especially at the point of collection of data. Yeah? The need to tell the consumer that, yes, we are collecting this data from you. And also subsequently how you're going to store it and how you're going to use it. And the legal hurdles therein. So ladies and gentlemen, because of time, we need to move to the next one. We're about 3 minutes behind schedule. So the next conversation, and as we go along with this, remember refreshments are still being served, so you can grab your cup of coffee as you continue. But for now, allow me to introduce the next conversation. The digital platform economy, it's red hot. Yes, that's the title. Allow me to introduce onto the stage our moderator for this session. Her name is Divine Muragijimana. Divine Muragijimana from Savoir Faire Global Consulting. Divine, kindly make your way to the stage. Karibu sana. A round of applause for Divine as she makes her way to the podium. This way. Karibu sana. There's a staircase. You will be fine. Karibu sana. Karibu sana. Now, Divine is a storyteller at heart. She has spent more than a decade and a half building brands and shaping brand narratives for growth-oriented businesses in Africa and the US. Most recently, she served as a vice president of brand and product marketing at Africa's leading payments brand, Cellulant. Currently, Divine serves as a strategy consultant and a fractional CMO for businesses and leaders in need of strategy development, advisory, and capacity development for their marketing and growth teams. She also has extensive experience in media as an editor. Notably, she served as the editor-in-chief of Applause Africa, a renowned Pan-African magazine. In her spare time, she enjoys dancing, traveling, hosting game nights, and preparing a mean meal every now and then. Nice to meet you, Divine. Karibu sana. Let's appreciate Divine Muragijimana, our panelist, our moderator for the next discussion. And now I'll leave it to you to introduce your panel and proceed with the discussion. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Good morning. You guys didn't have breakfast? You didn't eat? Do I give you a chance to go and get some coffee, come back so that you have more energy? Yeah? And in the meantime, I see a lot of empty seats here. And because I have awesome panelists, I would love them to be able to see a few of these seats filled in. So the guys who are backbenchers, those ones who went to school, used to sit in the back, I'm inviting you guys to sit in the front. Please. And as we're making our way, and please try to get some coffee because I want an engaging panel. As you're making your way, I'll introduce my panelists. And apparently for my panelists, the entrance is on the other side. So try to make your way to the other side. So my first panelist is Nelly Ndonye. Nelly is the regional manager, client service at East Africa, actually regional manager at Turn Left Media. I'm going to introduce them as they're making their way. My second panelist is Mother Huro. She's the MD of East Africa and the GM of Transit Music Limited, otherwise known to you guys as Boomplay. My Third panelist is Brian Abel. Brian is the head of growth of Welcome Tomorrow. For those who might not be familiar with Welcome Tomorrow, it builds sustainable online growth strategies encompassing deep analytics, consumer-driven creatives, and automated media campaign management. And then Mike Otieno, who is the president and co-founder of Vauzi. Welcome. All right. Hopefully I'm okay, right? You can hear me. Perfect. So I will allow you guys to, so today we're talking about digital platform economy, and that it's hot. I would love for us to deep dive around what it is, when you talk about digital platform economies, what are digital platforms, and why do they matter in our context? So as you're introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about what you do, let us know what is your perception of what a digital platform is and why it matters. Let's talk about why it matters for Africa, but also why it matters in the Kenyan context. We can start with ladies.
Lady first.
We can't hear you. I think you're.
Hello. It's okay. All right. All right. So what is a digital economy for me and why does it matter? I think when I think about the digital platforms, it's not limited social media. I think sometimes when you think about the digital platforms, we limit it to maybe social media, or we limit it to finance or fintech solutions or technology products. I think it's all the platforms that enable us to engage online, right? So that's what they are to me. That's what digital platforms is to me. And why those matter is because they're driving connectivity, they're driving how we consume services and goods, they're driving how we engage. We've become, the world has become flat in the terms of the digital platforms have enabled us to be everywhere and anywhere at any given time, to be able to buy products from anywhere and everywhere from any given time, to be able to transact and connect. All right.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi. Oh, nice. Martha is my name from Boomplay Music. And for me, the digital platform economy is the use of technology to ease the operation and strategy for my business. Essentially, a platform for service or as an enabler for my business to hit the KPI or the goals that my business needs. For example, in music right now, before we used to have vinyl. Do you remember vinyls? Anybody in the house? We used to consume music through vinyls, but right now we are consuming music through streaming services, whereby if I release a song right now, in 30 minutes, everybody in the world has already gotten my song. So this has been enabled by digital platforms or DSPs, which essentially use technology. So essentially that's what it means for my end.
Cool. Brad is my name. As you've heard, I currently sit as the head of growth at Welcome Tomorrow. We're essentially a preferred growth partner where we work with ambitious brands across the continent to be able to build what we're calling sustainable compounding growth. And I'll get a little bit deeper into it as we progress. From my perspective, I look at the digital platform economy. I'd take the internet. And then I take people who are dispersed in various places. And, you're seeing this with the likes of, obviously from a global perspective, the likes of Uber, Salesforce. And, locally, we also have solutions like that have been created. Even M-Pesa by itself can be seen to be a platform. So for me, I look at how...
Thanks a lot. So my name is Mike Otieno. And the Aussie platform really matches content creators to brands. And I would think of us as also like part of the creator economy as an extension of the digital platforms. What I think digital platforms do that's different is this idea of trust. So if you think about it, trust has almost shifted from humans to platforms. And this was actually the core idea that led to Wowzy. If you think about Uber, if a taxi driver was standing outside there, you're likely not to put your daughter in that car. But if it's going through Uber platform, you're more comfortable. And you see that also in the Airbnb world, where people are almost living in strangers' houses because a platform is involved. But if the platform wasn't there, there's no way you'd walk into a stranger's house and live for the night. So this idea that platforms are a trust element, and that is how they are able to match different parties who genuinely want to meet, want to do business, but there are some inefficiencies that deter them from doing that. And platforms play a major role in terms of enabling that. So that's how I think about digital platforms.
Okay, so keep the mic, because out of all of us sitting here, you're actually the one who's building, you're actually building a digital platform, right? So I'm curious to hear about your journey building Wowzy. First of all, why a digital platform? I think you've touched a bit about trust, but beyond trust, why Wowzy? And then what have you experienced when it comes to usage, basically building a platform where you have to get users? What are the things that you have to consider when you're building a platform like this?
Why Wowzy? I think a lot of things come to mind. One, Wowzy is a COVID baby, which means we started off in 2020 when the whole world shut down. And by virtue of that, COVID almost became like an accelerator of our platform. So I would say the idea that all of us were stuck in the houses and we found entertainment in our phones meant that people who, never valued digital were forced into it. And then similarly, all of us had to interact with Zoom and all these things, so it accelerated that. So I would say a huge part of it was timing and the fact that, the timing was right. If you think about Wowzy in itself, the core idea was to democratize influence and to standardize something that existed way before. So if you think of word of mouth marketing, it's something that has been there since humans existed, really. The idea that it's faster, it's better to reach more people through word of mouth. So what Wowzy has done is organize word of mouth and then scale it. And that's how we think about it. The journey has been interesting. As I said, it started off in 2020. We've seen significant traction. As we speak, there's about 200,000 content creators on the platform across maybe 49 markets in Africa. And we've been able to scale also with brands, leveraging the platform to connect to these guys. And I would also say, finally, the idea of democratizing this idea of influence so that it's not a reserve for people with millions of followers, but a border guy, a fisherman can also participate in this world. So those are some of the things I can think about. Yeah.
As you're thinking, I'll pose a question on you for what are the things you've had to consider when building this platform? What are they, especially when Kenya, so influencer marketing is something we hear a lot, right? What are the things over the last 2-3 years that you've had to consider when building this platform from a user perspective? I'm talking about that. Have you had to think about things like user experience, how you collect, how you maybe even actually use your data that you get all the time? So what are the things that you've had to consider when you're building this platform?
So a lot of considerations were made. I think first of all was even in the name. So there was a lot of thought that went into calling Wowzy. And if you think about the most used app in your phones, it's WhatsApp. So you want it to be either on the W area where you use a lot of the WhatsApp in general, or at the A level where your phone naturally organizes your apps into that way. So that's one of the things that we thought about. What name could we use? And then the second thing about the name was, how do you make sure that the name allows you to pivot beyond what you started with? For example, you might have seen Bolt had to rename itself. Previously, it was called Taxify, and Taxify limited them to taxi. But they knew in future they wanted to do drones, they wanted to do stuff, so they had to rename themselves to Bolt. So for us, we were like, how do we come up with a name that does not tie us to influence and enables us to build new verticals as we grow, enter social commerce, insights, whatever we decide to do in the future without needing to change the name. So those were huge considerations. The other big one was technology. Do you have a fully Kenyan team? Do you distribute it? So our tech team is fully distributed. It's in about 7 different countries. So we have engineers in Kenya, we have engineers in Nigeria, we have engineers in Ukraine. So that idea that you can now be remote first and you don't have to have everybody in one place was also a strong consideration when building the tech. So I would start with those two, but I think there's definitely multiple considerations you make when building a platform.
Let's pivot to Martha. So we're seeing, we're seeing transactional-based platforms, digital platforms. We're seeing a lot of innovative platforms coming, but there is now digital creative platforms that are coming up, and this brings me to think about the creative economy, which is what Wawzi is talking about. But what are the challenges? Because we see a lot of all the marketing campaigns today. Like if you don't have an influencer, for example, as part of a campaign, now CEOs are starting to question, what is this marketing plan that you have? But I assume, looking at how it's growing and how fast it's growing, it's leapfrogging regulation, it's leapfrogging innovation. What are the challenges that we're seeing in now digital creative platforms?
So essentially, we've done our research and boiled down to 3 challenges that we've seen in the market. And the market, it's not only in Kenya, but in Africa in general. Number 1 being policy. We have, for example, in the creative industry, we have a Copyright Act that is there. It was amended and assented. Before, we were using a Copyright Act that was from 1990s. Then it was assented and amended somewhat. That still has loopholes from here up to Timbuktu, because we don't have proper structures set in place to ensure that if somebody is pirating my music, or somebody is using my music illegally, or using my trademarked assets illegally, then I cannot hold them accountable. So the government still has a long way to go in terms of ensuring that the policies that are put in place are enforceable, and actually that if you use my content to market your brand, or you use my image as an artist, then, and you don't pay me for that, then I can enforce it, and actually you can be either jailed or fined. So we don't have such proper structures. Number 2 would be education. And this is true part from curricular perspective and also from strategy perspective, that is music business. We don't have, I can count on one hand the number of IP judges that we have in Kenya. They will not fit in one hand. I can also count in 2 hands the number of IP lawyers that we have in Kenya. They are not enough, simply not enough, because in the School of Law, IP it falls under civil law, but it's not by itself something that the students can go and learn. Whereby in this technology era, everybody is a creator, everybody wants to be a creative as well. So we don't have proper education in that sector. Being that, I'll speak about music because that's my background. In music, the music industry is also not properly structured. Everybody wants to do everything by themselves. They are their own manager, they're artists, they are there, as in it's all in one. So we don't have somebody who can can educate on branding, can educate on production, can educate on how to market your music, you know, like for example, agencies that are purely focused on how to push music out of, you know, Kenya and beyond. We don't have such things. And being that there's a gap, then there needs to be brands, the government, brands and developers that are put in place to ensure that this field is filled, right? And the third one being finance. Nobody is willing to, both individuals and brands, they're not willing to put their money into creatives. Why? Because simply there's a lot of data, but there's no interpretation of data. And traditional institutions like banks are looking down on creatives and not wanting to invest in them because they can't see, the math is not mathing, essentially, right? So how then do we ensure that people and brands are also investing into the creative economy to make it flourish? Those are the challenges, but we still have successes. For example, last year, the Kenya Bankers Association had a meeting, and you know, I like to call them, forgive me guys, Neanderthal institutions like banks, furniture institutions like banks are now looking at creatives as bankable. They are putting in place measures to ensure that you as a creative can use your IP as collateral. No longer are we going to banks with, you know, your title deed or your logbook. You can actually use IP. And this is made possible by Art at Work through the Awabuni Circle. So that's a step in the right direction. Also, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of data, but there's a shortcoming in interpretation. Most of the multinationals look at Africa as a place where there's, you know, it's a minute market. Why? We're 1.3 billion of us, right? But yet we're always overlooked as a minute market. Is because the data is everywhere. But now digital platforms have come to help the businesses interpret this data and also make them help them to make informed decision based off of what the business is doing. Look at Sauti Sol. They did Solfest based off of the data that was, you know, people really wanted them to do a show. Same to Shin City. I had a case on Boomplay where Arrow Boy was really, he was the most streamed artist in Mauritius. So that gave him the data to make a decision that, hey, I need to make a show in Mauritius. Most of my marketing strategy for 3 years was focused on Nairobi in Kenya. Like I had to please the Nairobi person for traction to be there. But essentially, when I looked at the data on my platform, most of the people who consume music on my platform are in Eldoret. Why? Because Eldoret has the most number of universities, and that's my core target market. So such kind of things are successes. Also, we've had successes in job opportunities being created for content creators. Who would have ever thought somebody doing crazy stuff like Crazy Kena would be earning? The Bahatis, as much as we love to hate them, Terrans, you know. So I mean, as much as we have problems, we've also had some successes to write home about.
Okay. Let me go to Nelly. So as we're talking, so she talked about the challenges and successes from a creator economy perspective. Let's go back now into media. So you're working with TurnLeft, which essentially is LinkedIn. So I will ask you as if now you work for LinkedIn. But when you talk about digital platforms, we rarely see some in Africa. I will come back to the Africa context, but for now, let's talk about what you're seeing as key trends, because you interact with, we're using your platform to market anyways, right? So you interact with either brands who are building digital platforms or brands that want to interact with digital platforms. So what are the key trends that you're seeing around the evolving and how the evolution of digital platforms in Africa, so whether they're coming in Africa or they're being born in Africa, and what is the role of diversification, where you start, where your route to market is one vertical and then you now layer. What are the trends you're seeing around that?
Okay, thank you. So I will take a minute and just step into the LinkedIn shoes for a little bit. We're a LinkedIn partner, yes, and we're a reseller partner supporting clients and brands across sub-Saharan Africa. But when we look at LinkedIn, what we need to realize that LinkedIn is a little bit behind when you look at other social media platforms. And that's because LinkedIn did not necessarily start as a social media platform, but a CV platform, a job seekers platform, a recruiter platform. So the marketing element, the social element kind of came up in 2009, and it's something we're still building up on. But there's certain trends that even LinkedIn has tried to jump on, but I see other social media platforms implementing the trends or building on those trends faster. Take, for example, e-commerce, right? We're seeing this Instagram shop, Facebook shop. E-commerce is becoming a big thing on social media platforms and digital platforms as such. So we're seeing that as a growing trend, and we expect that to continue. I think I saw something that TikTok is also launching proper shops on the platform because there's a need for that, right? So that's a key trend to look at. We also have the short form videos, which I would say TikTok kinda launched it, and then everyone else has followed. That's why we are seeing now we have Reels, and what's on that YouTube? Shorts. Yes, there you go. So short form video has become a big trend, and we're seeing that content creators are also pushing that trend because it's easier for them to create that kind of content. You hit the point immediately, and for the consumer, they are comfortable consuming that type of content. So that's also a big growing trend. The other is live and virtual events. I think this was accelerated due to COVID in that we couldn't all be where we wanted to be. And, at the time, it seemed like the easiest solution. And if you remember, and this is just to qualify my first statement on LinkedIn, if you remember, by that time, we had live events from Facebook already, and we already had them on YouTube. We had that already. But LinkedIn didn't have that. So LinkedIn was launching their live or LinkedIn Live in 2020. So live events have continued to grow. We expected that maybe there'd be a slowdown, but actually it hasn't. What people are doing is they're integrating their physical events like this with live events, and this is continuing to grow into things as complicated as conferences, government conferences, policy conferences, to events like AGMs for banks, for listed companies. So live events, virtual events, launch of products, that's also a really growing trend. The other thing to think about is AR. AR is still building up, but we expect it to continue to grow because of the experiences it provides, right? And the massive experiences that come with virtual reality events. When you think about, say, for example, tourism activities, or trying to give someone the idea of what a tourist experience would be, right? Virtual reality would give you that. We're also seeing that there's a lot of that in gaming, right? Is it Twitch or Switch in gaming? So there's growth in that area. So I would say those are the key trends to look at. I don't know if I'm forgetting another one, but those are the key ones. In terms of diversification, what we're finding is, yes, there's certain platforms that are focusing on niche, but they're not as big. And maybe that's because they're focusing on niche. However, you find that just like every product or brand, you're all trying to be 100% the solution for our clients, right? So if you meet a client, it's easier to grow an existing client than to continuously gain new clients. So what platforms are trying to do is to continue building around their solutions to meet the client's needs. That's why Facebook was first social, and then advertising, and then, Reels for engagement, and these shops. Your platforms are having to diversify to be able to provide solutions. Look at Safaricom. They started off as a telco, then they went into mobile money. Now they're a services platform. When you look at the M-Pesa app and the Safaricom app, and then they're also going in technology where they're providing you internet, domain registration, and the likes. So what brands and platforms, and I say brands and platforms interchangeably, but ideally platforms, are trying to diversify to ensure that they're a one-stop shop for a client in terms of all the services that they might need, whether it's across needs in terms of verticals, or within one particular vertical, trying to be the one and only solution for all of it.
Okay. So let me go to Brian now. So she's talking about diversification, right? So how do you actually just pivot as a platform? But now let's talk about the reality. One, we know that where we are in Africa, so I'm asking now in the context of Africa, building platforms and growing them is very expensive. It takes a lot of time. But what are you seeing as the best practices? So how do you, I mean, maybe the simplest question is, how do you grow one? And then we can't leave the stage without talking about AI, because AI is the buzzword. It's the sexy, it's basically now it's the sexy girlfriend for marketing nowadays. So how do we use things like AI to grow platforms and maybe make it cheaper for these platforms?
Thank you. So I don't want to speak to it only on a digital marketing perspective, because I think it encompasses more than that. It's looking at digital transformation and what you can use the digital world to do. From where we sit, we look at digital as a huge opportunity to do only two things. That's either to win or to learn. You should never lose in a digital world, because you can be able to literally measure everything. So that space and what digital offers, unfortunately, also evolves quite quickly. You know, a couple of years ago, all you had to do was get onto Google, buy a couple of keywords on AdWords, bam, and then life's good. And then now we're moving into spaces where guys are starting to talk more a little bit around clicks, installs. And it's a very simple thing. All you have to do is spend $1 million and you get 1 million clicks. But no one has $1 million, and it's not sustainable. And that's, you know, what we also believe in, what I talked about earlier. Building that sustainable compounding growth is very, very important. By being able to, one, almost change how we do things. I think the panel just before was talking heavily around that, changing the mindset and in a very big way. I was talking about AdWords. Before that, guys were talking about the funnel. You know, before even guys would figure out the funnel, guys are talking about AA, RRR. Oh my God, what's happening? And now even guys are already starting to talk about things like growth loops, and which is a technique that we also heavily believe in as of now. And we know it's going to change at a point. But as of now, that's what we believe in. And it's because moving away from funnels that are very linear, it's one way. I mean, you're going down. There's no coming back up. You have to go down the funnel. What happens when I get to the bottom of the funnel? It leads to silos. So marketing is on one side, commercial is on another side, product team is on another side. It leads to those silos being formed. And you know, in such scenarios, that then affects how you can be able to easily scale and grow your platform. What we believe in, something called the growth loop, it's something quite emerging, and it's almost looking at it the way we looked at computers when we began studying introduction to computer studies. You had data, you had it being processed, and you had an output. So can you take either a new or returning customer? What is the action you're trying to get them to do? And what's the output, and how then can you use that output, which is sometimes tends to be the data you're talking about, to then go back to the input again, because you want to be able to have something that's compounding. I mean, it's said that Einstein said compound interest is probably one of the, man's biggest invention, and it's because it's able to keep. It's the gift that keeps giving. So that's what we believe in, and using that approach, it's very easy for you to build that sustainable compounding growth. From where we sit also, we believe you have to sit at the middle of data, media, and creatives, which play a very big role. If the data team is not talking to the media team, is not talking to the creatives team, you're all again going to keep operating in silos. And all the activities you do would then be done until a specific point, and then you'd be like, okay, cool, it's not working, then let's go back again. And it's just more and more and more investment. And obviously, with economic terms right now, there's no more and more investment. You have to do it the best way possible. So that's what I believe in, and what we believe in. Digital has a very big role to play. You have to work on how you can be able to build sustainable compounding growth, and at the end of that, all you'll be able to see success. From an AI perspective, I think it's become this beautiful buzzword that everyone wants to talk about. But I think it's a huge opportunity for us to take a step back and really understand where we're going. Everyone is trying to innovate, whether it's Microsoft doubling down with OpenAI, whether it's Google with Bird right now, whether it's Google integrating that into their advertising now. There's a whole bidding strategy that uses AI. And all these things will keep happening, and they can help us in one way or another to be able to go a step further. However, being again that we're African and keep having this conversation about Africa being multilingual, there's so many aspects to what Africa can bring on board. We believe it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge time for providers to start training these models to understand how an African thinks, so how a Kenyan thinks versus how a specific Kenyan thinks in a specific tribe or a specific way. Because once that is done, then it's going to be more efficient. What is currently available can only go to a specific stage. I mean, if you look at the creative space now, I think Microsoft has released a tool that can actually help you develop creative. You just have to put a prompt. A kid seated by the roadside with a bank ATM card and gives you a creative. But then, is it really what you want? Is it something that your audience can relate to? We are not yet there, and I think that's where the opportunity lies. In terms of getting what you'd almost call AI prompters to think like locals.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you brought us to a good point. So let me start the part of it, right? From the audience, let me see. Let me actually just ask this question the other way. What is the most successful digital platform you guys know? In Kenya, what would you consider the most successful digital platform in Kenya? Facebook. I see Facebook. Facebook. So the most successful digital platform in Kenya is Facebook. I've been doing this survey for the last couple of days, and so I'm curious now. Let me bring it back to you guys. So we've talked about LinkedIn, talked about Boomplay. Wowzy, you're the only one that I can think of this might be relevant for this conversation. But now let's talk about the Kenyan context, and actually maybe just broadening it up to Africa. What is the most successful African digital platform? And if you don't have one, just say there's no one, and then we now go into the conversation on why don't we have one. We'll start with Nelly. Let's start with you.
I think the most successful digital platform, it depends on how you look at it, but I could even say it's M-Pesa or mobile money. And I would say M-Pesa in the context of Kenya, but why I won't say M-Pesa in the context of Africa is because it's not the leading mobile money transaction platform, I think, across Africa. I can't be sure about that. But I think mobile money as a solution, as a platform, is the biggest in Africa, in my opinion. I could be corrected. Successful, I think it is because, it's banked and banked. It's made payments and transactions, more seamless. It's created a need for even other companies to create the same. That's why there's MTN Money, there's Airtel Money, I'm sure there are more that I'm not naming. It's also birthed other mobile payment solutions that, are riding on the back of M-Pesa and maybe other mobile money payment solutions. I think that's what I would consider. I think there should be more, in my opinion. I cannot say for a fact why there aren't.
Okay, so before you give the mic to Martha, actually give you the mic to Martha, because you were talking about your marketing to Nairobi, right? But your audience is in Eldoret. What are when you look at the reality of Africa, and we talk about, let's not even go to investors, because I think Brian was talking about earlier about how we're seeing emerging digital platforms, that there are a lot of now emerging entrepreneurs who are trying to build digital platforms, but the reality is that the funding for digital platforms is rarely there. And if it's there, you're expected to turn around money in 7 years, which the reality in Africa is not there. So when you look at the statistics, what is the likelihood that we're going to actually see another digital platform that has impact in the likes of M-Pesa? And Mike and Brian, you can tell me whether M-Pesa has been good when it comes to the rise of digital platform or not. And if you are working for Safaricom, guys, I'm sorry in advance. It's not personal.
Wow. Well, I think essentially, then you should define what success means, because success might mean different things, and that's what Naomi was saying in the essential definition of success. Because, but also the challenge really has been every sector works in silos. Governments, they are creating their policies differently. Private sector are also creating, they think they know what they want in the market, or the solutions for the market. Developers are also thinking in their own bubble. And the consumers and the content owners are also, looking, and content owners can be also brands as well. They're thinking in a different way. So essentially, then we need collaboration to take this flight of ground, because it's not that we lack innovators in Africa. It's not that we cannot get funding for, locally built apps. It's also not that we do not have data, because there's a lot of data. It's just that is it Kasuku or Kalongo economy, that, data is everywhere, but it's still there, right? And everybody wants to interpret it in a different way. So there's need for that. Also, in terms of even numbers, for example, something as simple as internet penetration, we're still below 30 in Kenya. In the whole of Africa, we're below 40% of internet penetration. Let's not even talk about connectivity. Yeah, smartphone penetration is also below 30. As a matter of fact, when the world is moving more to smartphones, the rest of the world is moving more to smartphones, we're pushing more feature phones in the market, right? So essentially, then people need to make up their minds. Are we driving forward? Are we moving backwards and creating solutions for things that, we are going to anticipate to happen or not? So essentially, the problem is not a one person or one brand problem. It's something that multifaceted people need to sit down and actually come with a solution. So we can get more M-Pesas, we can get more Boomplays. Boomplay is an app that is African developed. The concept is all African, the teams are all African, but but the ones who own it are Chinese. Would you believe that? So then, how then can we get a Boomplay that is, made to solve African problems by Africans?
Ryan, your take?
Sorry. Unpopular opinion. I don't think M-Pesa is a digital platform. It started off, you could use it without the internet. So it wasn't a digital platform. However, where it is trying to go now with the app, and the app evolving into a super app, is a digital platform. And with that, I think they have a huge opportunity for success. And I think in the spaces that they're playing in right now, with the kind of communities they're trying to interact with right now, you can see where they're going. And I think there is an opportunity for success into the future. Beyond that, I think there are a lot of platforms that have been built locally, not just within Kenya, but across Africa, that are leveraging technology to do that, whether it's your neobanks, your fintechs. They're all trying to build a solution, and they're doing that because they sort of have to be the first to build. They're building infrastructure once again all over. People don't have access to banks for a specific reason. Why? There are a couple of blockers. So a fintech would come and be able to do that, and then other fintechs would come and build on top of that. So Safaricom did that, other M-Pesa did that, and it's been able to allow others to do that. In terms of the, I'll just speak a little bit around the challenges that don't make, or that have not given us a successful platform yet. I think what you said plays a very big role. Smartphone penetration, internet access, all these are challenges that need to be solved for that to happen. And it's not one person's problem. I think you're seeing guys like Safaricom also do their own part in that, because at the end of the day, it favors the digital economy. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of laying that groundwork, getting more people to have access to cheap and affordable devices, to cheap and affordable internet, and then being able to also work on the education piece, which I think is very important, and a couple of players doing that. I think without those three things, then we won't be able to take advantage of what you keep on saying is the youthful population in Africa that are going to determine everything in the next couple of years. We'll just keep remaining in the same position.
Okay. Mike, your opinion?
I think a lot of my inspirations come from a very small country called Estonia, which has only 1.5 million people. By the way, we traveled to Estonia to develop the first MVP for WowZ for various reasons. So, super small country, but at the time in 2020, it had 4 unicorns already. Kenya has no unicorn, and the unicorn is like a company valued at $1 billion plus, startup essentially. Estonia had 4 with only 1.5 million people. If you guys might remember Skype, that was a global platform that just blew up from Estonia. A lot of you might have used the Bolt app. It was started by a 19-year-old in Estonia. And right now, when I went there, it was 2020. Now they have 10 unicorns. And so my question has always been, what have they done differently? Because they're a small country, so you can't say they have even enough market to build a unicorn. And a bunch of things came to mind. One was very, very huge infrastructure layered by the government. I think when you are a kid in Estonia, you're given a computer. We talked about it in Kenya, but never implemented. And so when kids are in high school, they already have very, very strong talent and skills that they can start just building stuff. So that was a huge thing I saw there, which was massive infrastructure, and then which is able to then power talent. And then the second factor was capital. And the Skype founders, when they made billions of dollars selling Skype, they reinvested it back in the ecosystem. So there was a lot of people to look up to who had been there, done that. So therefore, guys are like, if a 19-year-old can build Bolt and give Uber a run for its money globally, why can't I build something? So that inspiration also plays a huge role. So I think Africa is in early days in the ecosystem. It's evolving. We need some of these factors to come to play because we have the talent for sure. It's just that these elements, the fragmented nature of our continent and all these things, once those are streamlined, we begin seeing those global level, explosion of digital platforms.
Okay. Just 2 more questions before we give it to the audience. So Martha talked about the realities, which is, and I always talk about in my previous life where I used to get fantastic presentations, and agencies will come and tell me they are going to reduce my cost of acquisition. They're going to do, there will be fireworks when it comes to their marketing campaign. But the reality is that we are all, even whatever digital platform you come up with, right? You're playing within that 30%, like let's say at margin, you're playing within a 40%. And if you're in Kenya, you are probably playing with 28% actually, 28%. So our market for digital platforms is 28%, right? But then you have now, Mike, you're now the only entrepreneur I think in the room where you have investors coming in, right? You are building a digital platform, you are given funding, and that funding is supposed to have an ROI or 10 times ROI within 5 years. Does that investor have 5 to 7 years, right? I'm curious about, one, from experience, right? What is it going to take? What is it going to take to build a successful, and successful meaning it has value, it has users, and it solves a very African or Kenyan niche problem, platform that's successful, that actually grows, that will give, hopefully, Meta a run for their money within the African context? What is it going to take? What do we need to do to combat these challenges, which is internet penetration, smartphone penetration, education, right? Our education system. What is it going to take to build that? And for those ones who are in the room who want to build a platform, how do we start? So I can take 2 on what is it going to take, and 2 on how it's going to, how you start.
Okay, a successful African Kenyan platform, what is it going to take? I think there's still a lot that we need to do around infrastructure. We need the infrastructure. We can't get away from that. We need to make sure that there's penetration. So there's a lot of building and rolling out that needs to be done. And that can be done by the government, or it can be done through partnerships, public-private partnerships to enable that expansion. The other thing that comes to mind is education. I think we take for granted, and I think it's been highlighted by my co-panelists, that, we assume because of the community you're in, the people you surround yourself with or you're surrounded by, and 2 levels down, that because they have smartphones, they know how to use a smartphone, they know how to order an Uber, they know how to order a meal from Jumia Foods or one of the other. We assume that that's the same across the country, but really it's not. You'll be surprised at the level of digital literacy in our country. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. Also, same thing, we need, government has to play a part, and at the same time, there are opportunities for public and private partnerships. I would say, for me, the top 2 would be those 2 key areas, because once you've addressed the 2 key areas, then, driving down the solutions and growing your market share then becomes easier.
I'll boil it down to 2, research and collaboration. There's a lot of research that needs to happen and to be documented, because content is king, but context is King Kong. We never put context. We never put we never put context into what we do. There's a lot of data we miss on interpretation. There's a lot of content we don't give it context. As East Africans, we are natural born storytellers, even in our music. I went to the club, I met a boy, we dated, we had children, we died. I think there's always a storyline, right? But then your brand also has to envision that to work in this market, because remember that wave of Wamlambez Wamnyonyez? Wamlambez Wamnyonyez, we remember? Oh, we don't identify with that. Anyway, any Kenyan that was in Kenya or in the diaspora, when they saw another Kenyan, they would just go Wamlambez, the other one would go Wamnyonyez, So there needs to be, do research on what your brand needs, or what the market needs, and if your brand can cure that. For example, in Boomplay, we identified that Africa does not have a unifying currency. So we don't have a dollar or a euro. So what did we do? We had to ensure that the consumer pays using their local currency. If you're in Kenya, you pay using Kenya shillings. If you're in Tanzania, you use T shillings. If you're in Nigeria, you use Naira. So we don't, it's 54 countries, for God's sake. So, but we cannot put all of them together to have the same solution to their problems. So a lot of research is required for your brand or what you're developing, to identify the needs, how to brand your platform, how to identify with the consumer, how to market, and how to push for your brand, right? And number 2, collaboration. As I said before, there needs to be, people need to stop working in silos. The government needs to get off their high horse and come down to earth. We also need to get off our high horse and come back down to earth as private sector. Developers also, it doesn't, we don't have to have people in all different countries. We can have developers here in Kenya. Also, us as consumers, we also need to make up our mind. I like to give this example. When my mom used to send me to the shop to buy margarine, she used to say, go and get Blue Band. But she's sending me for prestige. Such, collaborations that foster such kind of things. I digress. But yes, content is king, context is King Kong. Mic drop.
Wow.
How do you follow that?
Yeah, how do I follow that? And I've never built a platform, so it's actually Mike's thing. However, I think for me, I speak more around the opportunity that's there. I think I'm a huge believer in it. The population is there in terms of the workforce. There is still a lot of work to be done in terms of internet penetration, smartphone penetration, and those are the basics that are going to give us the digital economy that we're looking for. And the different players that are in that space also have a very big role to play. Looking at investors in terms of people who have that opportunity of changing the mindset of investors is going to be big. The 5 to 7 years cannot work in Africa, so what else can we do? Africa is 54 different markets. Also, how can I be able to factor that in? What works in Kenya may not work in Tanzania. How can I factor that in, as much as it's 45 minutes, an hour flight away? So there's a lot of work to be done that side. I won't press even more on what government needs to do, but obviously there's a lot of what government needs to do in terms of making the space easy enough for people to be able to grow. And I mean, learning from markets like Estonia, I think Eastern Europe is miles ahead when you look at digital transformation and the kind of innovations that come out of that area. So yeah, that's sort of what I'd look at in terms of the opportunities. And then I'll keep underscoring this. I'm a big believer in it, education, and having the mindset of you don't know what you don't know is going to help a lot of people to change their mindset and allow us to be able to grow and get to the next stage.
So for me, I think it would take a bunch of things. So one is aggregating significant local capital. It's a big thing. And then the second is making the continent less fragmented. So on the first one, if you think about local capital, we have massive capital in the continent, but it's going to land in real estate and very safe investments. So the idea would be unlocking some of that to enable the next generation of creators. Wowsy only exists because a high net worth individual Kenyan gave us our first check to, de-risk the fact that the founders were leaving good jobs, and we were able to, start based on that. So that initial, shall I call it angel capital, is important, but how can we make it significant enough so that the ownership of these digital platforms does not, go to the real capital owners eventually? And then the second thing is making the continent less fragmented. And this is an experience I've had where we now are seated on a contract to run campaigns in 49 African markets. It's chaotic. You have to set up entities in different countries. Currency is different. So there's a lot of fragmentation. Traveling to a fellow African country is way more expensive than going to London. So all these things mean we cannot harness the 1.2 billion consumer. So if those are, removed and we are less fragmented, and it will take a village, it's not like, one person can do it, and something as simple as an African passport, so you can be able to travel easily. So there are all these things that don't seem like barriers, but when you're innovating and you're trying to scale, they become blockers to, achieving your highest potential.
Okay. All right. It makes me wonder, just something as we are closing, whether by grouping Africa, Africa is talking about Estonia. Estonia is one country. By putting the pressure on building for Africa, are we maybe putting too much pressure on innovators? And that one I will pause there as I get questions from the audience. I have one question here. Is there a mic?
Who exactly do we need to strangle or rather have polite conversations with. What's the name of this person that needs? Because we say government, but I mean that's no one in particular. So who's the first person, that marketers need to have polite, forceful conversations with to, get all these things started? Because it is a problem when you're trying to build these platforms and there's people blocking things way higher up the food chain. But I think the problem is also there's no face to put this target on. So who would that be?
Mike, who is the person? Mike, Nelly, those two. And then Martha, and then Brian. So, Mike, you are the one who's building a digital platform,
No, I wouldn't pinpoint it to someone else. But I think if I look internally, there's a lot that we can all do to be able to, make some of these things work. For example, as an innovator, you might be more comfortable sitting at the back doing your code, but we now find ourselves having to, get involved in thought leadership and policy and getting out there, because you realize you actually need to do that to be able to succeed. For example, Daniel Yu, very interesting builder, went and really engaged the Zanzibar government and, got a 10-year tax break as a startup. So that alone, moving his whole team to Zanzibar and engaging the government is an example of someone not pointing, but being like, hey, let's get to the table and let's do something. And I feel it's the same way with investors. Instead of me pointing and saying, you can distribute your portfolio of investment from real estate, I actually went and spoke to this particular high net worth individual, and they wrote me a check. And I was able to show them return year on year of the amount they gave me, and be prudent, not go and, gamble with it, for example, which we've seen a lot in the continent. So I would look internally. I think there's people to engage. There's ways we can be able to find middle ground. And it takes time. Ecosystems take time to build. Yeah.
Mike was polite, Nelly. It's very, very, very diplomatic. Mike was very diplomatic.
I do agree with Mike's perspective. But let me also give another perspective. When you say government, you're correct, you're very right. There's no person, right? And when we think about startups, there's actually no person, it's startups. It's a variety of people. So there's a group on this side and there's a group on the other side. I think the government is already structured, which means that, if we needed to approach the government, there's the first door, the second door, the third door that we can follow, right? But when you look at this other side around innovation, startups, platforms, we are not together. We are not structured. We have absolutely failed in creating collaborations that are powerful. We don't even have an association. If you look at the advertising space, we've got APA, we've got marketing association, there's like 6 different associations. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I think we just haven't found a common pain point that we're working towards solving, right? And if we were to be able to create this type of association or grouping or whatever you want to call it, I don't have the words for it, but I think if we created a group, then there would be 2 groups that need to communicate, which then makes it easier. Oh, it's not working. Okay, which also makes, I can hear myself. Which makes it easier. And that's how, when you look at like alcohol brands, they have lobbyists. When you look at tobacco brands, they have lobbyists. When you look at, the more developed markets, pharmaceuticals, they have lobbyists. Maybe if we came together in a certain way, form, or structure, we would be able to also have our own team of lobbyists who would be able to fight for what we need, or at least be there to negotiate. Because as a developer, as an innovator, as a marketer, yes, we know what the problems are, but we are too focused on whatever we need to build or whatever we need to do to be able to also do the job of lobbying, to even do this necessary negotiations or have these conversations. So I think There's a lot that needs to be done. I don't know if that's the direction that Silicon Valley went. Maybe there's something we can learn from that. I don't think we need to always reinvent the wheel. Maybe we need to look outside and see how has it worked in Estonia? How did they arrive at where they are? How did it work with Silicon Valley? How did they arrive there? How did it work, in whatever other country where they're being successful or they're making great strides, and then see what we can borrow from there and adapt something that would work for either our country or for our continent as a whole.
Martha, please don't be diplomatic. There has to be something.
I am not even going to try.
Okay, good. You might get your answer
The
now.
thing is, we need to accept the fact that there is a problem first. And I'll speak in Swahili. Kuoga ni kutoa nguo. We need to accept that there is a problem first. Everybody in these four facets, government, private sector, developers, and owners, we all have problems, but we are too good for our problems. We don't look at them as problems. Government has an issue with structures. They have a policy, but they have issues with structures. Private sector, we have issues with go-to-market. Developers, they are in their own bubble. The owners of whatever content or brand also think that they can do without the other three. So we need to establish that there is a problem and agree to sit at a table and eat together for us to find a solution. So as long as we keep at ourselves and say, me, I don't have a problem, then the problem will keep festering and nobody will, will identify with the problem until it's too huge to compound. But if we agree and understand that there is a problem and research on how the problem is affecting each sector and how we can solve that problem, then, we'll still be sitting here laughing with you and giving you nuggets of wisdom.
Ryan, do you have a point or I move?
I can't match that.
Okay. Any other question before I move? One more question. You might have done such a good job that there's no other question. Is there a question? Okay, so let's go to parting shot, right? Final one. We went from Africa is a dark continent to Africa is rising. And as Martha is talking about the problems, and I think the biggest problem is that we are lying about the statistics. We're lying about data. We talk about this 1 billion people that we have, right? So houses you're building for 1 billion in Africa. But actually the people you can access is what? 28%, 30%. If you go continental, it's 40%. What is your parting shot? I think relating to, okay, what do we actually need to do? Not the people. I don't want the person to talk to, but do we need to start relooking at our infrastructure, our landscape, our data, so that agencies stop going to a client with very nice, presentations that promise the moon, but come back, they're just giving us, Nairobi? Do we need to think about how to engage governments, right? And maybe governments start lobbying and bringing these people together. What is your parting shot around, okay, what's next? Starting Nelly, I can start with Mike, but I've been very unfair to him. So starting with Nelly. Maybe Brian.
Okay.
Go first as well.
I'm happy to. I think Mike is back. So from what I see, I think there's a need for change of mindset. And I'll keep, what I was talking about doing, not knowing what you don't know is something that's helped us personally. So where we see it, we want to be able to almost democratize the kind of work that we're doing. We want to be able to work with, whether it's brands or individuals, in a way that would be able to allow them to build that sustainable compounding growth, not for the short term, but for the long term, and not just to look at our generation, but also for generations to come. And so that's why we are heavily in that space of trying to democratize it. We've not found the fit yet, but we're trying to find that, and we have a couple of ideas in terms of where we want to go. So from my seat, I'd say there's a need for change of mindset, that things are not the same, things will always keep evolving, and the sooner you take the time to be able to learn that, the better for you.
Okay. Nelly?
All right. So for me, my parting shot when you look at platforms is, and this is both from when I say audience, not just the consumer or the user, but it's everyone in that food chain, including your government, the legislation, all that. We need to look at that because we find that maybe you have a great idea, but then it launches, it's going great, but halfway through it, legislation comes in and, that just breaks you all apart or breaks up your business all apart. Or you're doing so well, it gets to payments, but you just haven't understood your consumer. I remember, and allow me to just give this example. I order from Jumia on the fly, like I'll order dinner, I'll order blender, something like that. And my watchman came to me. He has a smartphone because every once in a while he'll send me a random WhatsApp video just to make me laugh and remind me that I should buy him lunch. And he called me aside and he said he wants to buy a TV and he sees that I get from Jumia stuff, but he doesn't know how to use it. But he would like to get a TV because he's been told that he can get a good TV and Jumia usually has deals. And I actually had to sit with him and show him what there was and what the deals are, and also help him understand that, towards the end of the month or in this period, is it April, August, November, they have some really great offers. We take for granted who our consumers are and their level of digital literacy. So I feel like there's a lot of understanding our audience that we haven't done that we need to do. And that will give us, it'll give us a better launching pad as to where we want to go, or what we want to achieve with our platforms. And maybe as another way of looking at the same thing is inclusivity. Are we being inclusive in the solutions we are developing, or are we just building it for the community that we see and we hang out with and we know about? Have we actually gone out? And I think this is a great pain point for Divine because, well, she was back as brand, and myself, I've also been in agency for the longest. We give solutions as agency, but we haven't really gone to experience where the brand is being experienced. So the solutions never match up, and that's where we're not being inclusive as a solution provider from an agency perspective. And it's the same way with platforms. We're building for what we see around here, and maybe 2 or 3 layers down. We're not really going all the way down, right? For example, there's great opportunity in agri-technology, right? Because when you think about agriculture and you think about as a country, as an African country, and as a country as Kenya, there's a lot of opportunity in agriculture. We need to grow more food. We have the land for it, but we're not doing it. But we're not able to even give weather predictions that are reliable. We're not able to connect the farmers to the market adequately and efficiently. So there's a lot of, we need to really think about, are we being inclusive in the solutions we are coming up with? We're being too focused on what's the trend or the buzz or the conversation that's happening right now or the hype. And we're forgetting that we are all competing in one little pot, yet there's a whole big pot that's just being left untouched.
I'll go to Mike and then Martha.
So yeah, for me, the parting shot is really thinking about the context. I still believe a lot in Africa. Median age 19. By 2050, 1 in 4 humans will be African. We'll have the largest workforce, largest arable land, largest amount of minerals. So I know this slogan that's used a lot by marketers saying, when you're born in Africa, you're born rich. Because there's all these things that we have. But then how do we harness these opportunities to be able to, grow and distribute wealth and create jobs? So all those things matter.